I think one of the things with tracking, so we want to track who's putting money in and what are the plans to do something, but we also want to track over time, right? And track, well, was it a good idea? Is this something that, is it an investment that actually did achieve the outcome that was expected? So I'd like to welcome Ben Atkinson from Reall to come and join us. Now you'll note, if you look at all of the logos that have been up on our screen here, that IFC, that Estate, Intel, and Reall have all been sponsors of this conference. Delighted that you're all contributing in this way. Thank you very much. Ben, come on up. We've been working very closely with Reall around the data agenda for Africa. And that really is looking at the long-term process for investment and then the outcome of that investment, whether it's a green focus, which is something we've just started engaging with, and Ben will talk about that, or the broader affordable housing environment across the continent. With Ben are two panelists from my team. Alison Tshangana is the editor of our yearbook. And this is what we've been giving as a gift to each one of the speakers, but it's available on our website right now, this very minute, and you can download it. It's a bit big. And it covers the affordable housing market in all countries across the entire continent. And Alison will tell you a little bit more about that. It's available in both English and French, and you can download it from the website. And then Allan Mutuma, who is the program manager for our Open Access Initiative and Data Agenda. And they will join Ben, who is the head of research.
Policy Evidence and Research.
Policy Evidence and Research Manager. This is what happens when you work so closely with someone, at Reall. So please, would you like to have a seat, or do you want to stand here?
I'm the only person. I think I'll stand.
Go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, I'd like to start with an apology. We had very much all hoped to be here in person, but unfortunately, circumstances didn't allow that. So, yes, as Casey said, I'm joined by our two colleagues from CAHF online, Allan from Kenya and Alison from South Africa. Data is the cornerstone of a green, affordable homes movement. And the lack of data in the markets in which we operate is significantly constraining investment and preventing the building of affordable homes for the future. Climate data is one of the biggest data gaps, and as the climate emergency continues to quite rightly put the lens of everything we do through climate, fixing this particular deficit is vital. So, over the next 20 or so minutes, Alison, Allan and I are going to be highlighting the role of data within the intersection of climate and housing, talking about what this tells us, what this doesn't yet tell us, and we're going to be highlighting the key tools and frameworks that Reall and CAHF use to collect and share climate data, and the hugely important role that people in this room play in filling these data gaps too. So I'm going to start by speaking a little bit about Reall's experience in this area before bringing in Allan and Alison to highlight specific findings. So Reall works to transform affordable housing markets through investing in housing, gathering evidence, and advocating for change. As I said, data is essential for good decision-making, but unfortunately, the markets we work in suffer from significant data deficits. For the past couple of years, we've partnered with CAHF on a shared data agenda, including what we call the market-shaping indicators, what I'm displaying on the screen here. So these market-shaping indicators have now been rolled out into 9 countries in Africa and 2 in Asia, and they're focused on collating existing data, mainly, but not exclusively, from public sector. And this is data that is often really hard to come by. It's often buried deeply in reports, split across multiple different organizations, generally just inaccessible. So what we're doing is unlocking this data, pulling it all together, putting it into one place, and making it available to everyone. These indicators cover the whole housing value chain, including land and investment, construction, sales and rental, maintenance, and the wider contextual environment. All this data is then available at reall.net/MSI, this page here, where we link to sources and where the data is quality scored to help people understand its relevance. This is essentially the first stage of this process, where data is missing or where quality is low, which is very often. We start working with data holders and the wider sector actors to improve it. It really becomes a process of advocacy, of pushing for change, and of really encouraging others to share this data and to work collaboratively. We're also continuing to adjust and expand on what's collected, which is what we're touching on here now. So we spent this morning hearing about how important the housing sector is in terms of reducing emissions and building climate resilience. And obviously there's opportunity here too. I just want to quickly plug my colleague Patrick, who's speaking a little bit later about a new green affordable housing finance instrument that we're introducing. But in the market shaping indicators work, we're trying to reflect this too. So this year we've worked specifically to strengthen our understanding of two key themes. That's climate and gender. On the climate side, we've incorporated around 20 new quantitative and qualitative indicators. I'm not going to list them all, but I've tried to show what these are on the screen here. And through these indicators, we've tried to highlight the risks, the gaps, and the opportunities within these markets. So I've been talking for a while now. I'm going to hand over to Allan, who I hope is in the background here, who can talk a little bit more about what this looks like and what this means. So Allan, brilliant, thank you, didn't see that. Allan, can you talk a little bit about what the work has shown us to date, and how does this relate to the wider data landscape?
On improving our data collection efforts with regard to climate and gender. And for this discussion, of course, I'm going to focus on climate. So as you pointed out, we usually collect data on 115 or so market shaping indicators per country. And 20 of those indicators offer useful insights into climate and sustainability related issues. So these include density, access to services, carbon, and housing quality. In this round of data collection, however, we've focused our effort on 6 countries, namely Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Nigeria. So our collection methodology of data was both quantitative and qualitative in nature, and the qualitative data interestingly offered more insights because hard data on climate issues affecting housing are presently not being collected in most of these countries we study. So for the qualitative insights gained within this data collection exercise was mainly gotten from interviewing experts within the 6 countries. And these are the following sort of insights that we gleaned from climate issues within the housing space. So firstly, and a well-known fact, is that climate risks tend to affect the poor more disproportionately more than the middle and upper class. And the prevalent climate risk challenges that were being faced in these countries were drought, flooding, landslides, and in particular within Mozambique, monsoon cyclones. Secondly, most countries, and I think this was touched on by a number of the people talking before, was that most countries have green building councils and policies. So these institutions are there, but there is a low uptake from an execution and adoption perspective, primarily because of the low sensitization and perhaps misconception of what green building system means to business cases for developers, and also in terms of implementation for the people who are regulating this industry. Thirdly, in most countries surveyed, there were little to no incentives perhaps offered by the government for adoption of these green building systems. And there was a question from the people in the audience regarding the incentives that are being offered. And this is in addition to the building regulation codes that also have gaps in terms of incentivizing adoption of green systems. And this would perhaps be a call for action for the different government and regulatory representatives in the room to consider incentives that can be offered to developers who adopt green building systems. That being said, however, in Kenya, we did find that the government has allowed for tax exemption for green bonds and green financing that would exist within that space. Now, on the quantitative findings for the climate indicators, the main finding was that there is not much data being collected within this space. And the examples of the indicators that we're looking at were the number of projects that are certified as having met EDGE standards, and this collection is by public institutions, the number of dwellings that are EDGE certified, or the number of green mortgages. And our experience in this data collection exercise is that the data is not publicly available from the national aggregators, and perhaps this then sets the stage for the open access initiative. So as you rightfully mentioned, Ben, while Reall and CAHF have been pursuing the data agenda and the collection of the market shaping indicators from public data sources, we've also partnered on an additional initiative called the Open Access Initiative, which seeks to collect project level data. And this is from private sources, such as implementation partners, developers, as well as financiers. And the approach that we have envisioned within this particular initiative is that implementation partners will provide or collect data during the life cycle of the projects in 4 broad categories. So these include the products that they are offering, the process being followed in terms of the statutory steps, the time and the cost it takes to get these statutory approvals, the people being targeted, and the performance of these particular projects over the long term. And the key intention of this open access initiative is that the data collection process will shine a spotlight on climate smart and sustainable, affordable housing delivery, of course, while also touching on the issues of gender. And while we focus the data collection on product, process, people, and performance, there will be explicit themes around the issues of climate and sustainability as they arise within these particular projects. So in the short term, this will offer project-based indications that will then influence the macro perspective that we have been discussing and that are being offered by the MSI indicators. And in the long term, we hope that the data collected by the market shaping indicators will allow us to have explicit reporting on the issues as they become more mainstream beyond the project level. And so what am I saying in a nutshell is that the overall philosophy behind the open access initiative, as well as the effort that we are making in terms of collecting data on the climate indicators, is that when we compete in how we access data, and this is something that Casey likes saying, rather than in how we use it, we then are wasting our resources. And it would be then a call of action for all stakeholders and participants to engage in this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allan. So, Casey highlighted it earlier. The CAHF yearbook is something that I'm sure the vast majority of people in this room know and use and consider to be a fantastic resource. Obviously, it is a huge undertaking each year and aligns very closely with what we're talking about here, with the data agenda, with market shaping indicators, with the open access initiative. So I want to pass over to Alison at this point, and perhaps you could talk to us a bit about how the yearbook addresses the issue of climate change this year and what you've learned through this process.
Sure. Thank you, Ben, and thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm sorry not to be able to join you in Cairo in person. As Ben said, we have today put online the Housing Finance in Africa Yearbook, our 2022 edition, which you go to CAHF's website, you'll be able to view right now. For those of you who aren't aware of the yearbook is obviously an annual publication, but it covers all 55 countries and territories in Africa with a 4 or 5 page profile of each country in terms of its housing and housing finance market. It also contains an overview article that's authored by our director, Kesia. And the exciting thing is about this year, we have focused on green issues within the yearbook. So the overview article addresses and sets out a framework for thinking about affordable housing and green issues. And then within each of the country profiles, we've highlighted within a text box the particular green issues in that country and what we do know about them and what data is available. So as you can see on the screen, I think one of the key things to note in terms of how we incorporated green issues was, first of all, we needed to add indicators. So as Allan has just said, we looked at what some of the key indicators are that speak to vulnerability to climate change, as well as the impact of housing on climate change efforts. So we thought about some of those indicators and have built them into the profiles. The way we collect the data for the yearbook is absolutely unique. And I want to highlight it because it speaks exactly to the sort of data collection that Allan and Ben are speaking to. The yearbook is a large publication. It's 380 odd pages, but it's authored this year by 63 different consultants around Africa, authors and co-authors. So every single profile, most of them are written by different authors who are largely based in country, and that's to enable local perspective and local data collection. So in addition to authoring the profile, our local consultants collect data against a data survey that we provide to them. It's about 35 indicators that this year included some gender and climate indicators. So I do want to give a big thank you to all of those authors and editors. We have a large team of editors as well who make this yearbook happen, and a number of them I'm aware are on this session today. I have the privilege of presenting the yearbook, but they really are the ones who are creating it. As well as Susan Carey, who is our main editor, and Marine, who edits the French version. So I just wanted to highlight on the screen that you see here now is some of the key indicators that we picked out to look at the vulnerability of countries to climate change impact. So for instance, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, these are data from the IMF that looks at the frequency of natural disasters in Africa. And just the pure visual here is disturbing and very telling. But you see the increased number of disasters that are encountered by African countries, particularly in the last 10, 15 years. We also wanted to think about sea level rise and how that will impact upon human settlements and on housing. So one of the indicators that we decided to pick out was to look at the percent of the total population in a country that is living in areas where the elevation is below 5 meters above sea level. So this is the population that is in an immediate threat under sea level rise. And you can see by the graph in the bottom right that in some countries this is a considerable portion of the population. So in the Gambia it's close to 24%, nearly a quarter. In Egypt, it's very large, over 20% where we are, but similarly in Mauritania and Seychelles. Seychelles, not surprising because it's an island nation. But you can see, of course, that the impact varies, but it's quite significant. We're not speaking about 1 to 2% in these countries. We're talking about large portions of the population that are within threat of sea level rise. And then we were thinking a little bit too about some of the relationships between these indicators. So one of the key themes that comes out at a high level within the overview is urbanization and its impact on climate change. So we've been speaking about urbanization in the sector for a number of years, and it's a key theme. But as we see climate and floods and wildfires and storms hitting rural areas, the devastation means that many low-income households are not able to rebuild. They're not able to come back. And as a result, they move into the cities for economic opportunities. So climate change is impacting on the urbanization rate. Now, as the urbanization rate, of course, increases, in situations where those main urban areas are not able to plan adequate housing at the type of supply that's needed for the influx of households, then we'll see an urbanization rise contributing to the percent of population that's living in informal settlements. So all of these dynamics are related to each other. And that's what we're struggling to think about and what we're grappling with in the yearbook specifically this year. So I just wanted to highlight some of those key things. I think, of course, the key point is that what we're seeing in the themes that were coming out in all of the profiles were twofold. One of them was that climate disasters and natural disaster events were disproportionate when it comes to housing. That's one of the key points. The second one reinforces what Ben and Allan have already noted, which is the lack of data. So in the context of
Give it a second.
But what we really need is to have on-the-ground sources backing the impact. Thanks, Ben. I'll pause there.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So I think we're coming close to the end of our session here. So just wanted to close out on these couple of points. So as we've discussed, data is key. Much of it is still unavailable. And failing to capture this is really constraining our markets. All of this is not a one-time exercise. It's an ongoing piece of work. It's a process of working with people like you, people in this room, to really extract and understand and build. So many people in this room undoubtedly have an end with what someone shouted out from the audience. Data is cool. Thank you.